I think I messed up. Wait, I'm sure I did. Welcome to Young Elder TV, where UFOs, religions, Anunnaki, and black youth collide in a cosmic comedy. Meet Marcus, our fearless leader. He's an aspiring scientist and part-time alien enthusiast. Then there's Maya, his sister, a no-nonsense lawyer who secretly believes in ancient astronauts. Oh, and don't forget Grandma Pearl. She swears she had tea with an alien once. And finally, their quirky neighbor, Mr. Thompson, convinced he's a reincarnated god. With 3 million fans already hooked, Young Elder TV blends laughs with galactic mysteries. Ready to join the fun? Hit that subscribe button and dive into the cosmic chaos. Young Elder TV, where the stars align for comedy.
What's going on YouTube? Listen up, Young Elder Gang. This is Dr. Joe Blow at you with another banger. Please make sure you like, subscribe and share this video, fam. I hope this video get at least 100,000 likes. In this video, you will find history, definitions, scripture, information, and best of all, what we Americans have been deprived of from the beginning, the truth. Keep in mind, this content used in this video is intended for educational and informational purposes only. We will give you the total truth as we best understand it today. Be sure to hit that like button, Young Elder Gang. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Hit that bell and don't forget to check back with us every day for new content. All right, let's get started. Today we'll go in on the dark side of Project 2025. As Americans, there is nothing we hold more dear than our families, faith, and the American dream. Unfortunately, Project 2025 threatens all three. Project 2025 presents a grim outlook for American families and the fundamental values and freedoms that exist today. The plan will drastically cut budgets to critical support programs, likely leading to widespread financial instability, health crises, educational setbacks, housing insecurity, and food shortages. Project 2025, while presented as a mandate to foster economic growth and enhance national security, poses a significant threat to the stability and well-being of countless families across the nation. If successful, the project is likely to lead to devastating consequences for existing programs and policies that provide essential support to families. Make no mistake, Project 2025 will undercut the American dream for another entire generation. And it will have our government turn its back on hundreds of thousands of innocent people in vulnerable situations, which is exactly the opposite of what our faith calls us to do. What is Project 2025? The Project 2025 Presidential Transition Project is a well-funded, 8-figure effort of the Heritage Foundation and more than 100 organizations to enable a future anti-democratic presidential administration to take swift, far-right action that would cut wages for working people, dismantle social safety net programs, reverse decades of progress for civil rights, redefine the way our society operates, and undermine our economy. A central pillar of Project 2025 is the mandate for leadership, a 900-plus page policy playbook authored by former Trump administration officials and other extremists that provides a radical vision for our nation and a roadmap to implement it. Proposals from Project 2025 discussed in detail throughout this guide that they claim could be implemented through executive branch action alone, so without new legislation, include cut overtime protections for 4.3 million workers, stop efforts to lower prescription drug prices, limit access to food assistance, which an average of more than 40 million people in 21.6 million households rely on monthly, eliminate the Head Start early education program, which serves over 1 million children annually. Cut American Rescue Plan, ARP programs that have created or saved 220,000 jobs. Restrict access to medication abortion. Push more of the 33 million people enrolled in Medicare towards Medicare Advantage and other, worse, private options. Expose the 368,000 children in foster care to risk of increased discrimination. Deny students in 25 states and Washington, D.C. access to student loans because their state provides in-state tuition to undocumented immigrants. Roll back civil rights protections across multiple fronts, including cutting diversity, equity, and inclusion-related DEI programs and LGBTQ+ rights in healthcare, education, and workplaces. The term United States business means A, a United States citizen, B, a corporation, partnership, or other association created under the laws of the United States or of any state, including the District of Columbia or any Commonwealth territory or possession of the United States, Or C, a foreign corporation, partnership, or other association, more than 95% of which is owned by persons described in subparagraphs A and B, and the United States of America, USA Corp., or USA in Corp. Inc., commonly known as the United States, US or USA Corp. Inc., is a business primarily located in North America, West Amexem. A corporate means relating to large companies or to a particular large company. Interest rates are higher for corporate clients than for private clients. The economy is growing and corporate profits are rising. Corporate means relating to large companies or to a particular large company. A partnership is the relationship between two or more people to do trade or business. Each person contributes money, property, labor, or skill and shares in the profits and losses of the business. Publication 541, Partnerships, has information on how to form a partnership. It is common to hear that the United States is broke and cannot afford to continue spending and borrowing at its current pace. Indeed, that was the argument put forward by some to justify the fourth debt ceiling standoff over the past 12 years. While one can make a credible argument to pull back on government spending during a time of inflation, it is simply true that the US is on the verge of a debt and deficit crisis. The total debt of US governments, federal, state, and local, is $33.6 trillion, with the federal portion accounting for $31.4 trillion. At first glance, that figure underscores the argument to cut back on spending and the need for a periodic crisis to create the conditions for spending restraint. Tax cuts, stimulus programs, increased government spending, and decreased tax revenue caused by widespread unemployment generally account for sharp rises in the national debt. Rising debt means fewer economic opportunities for Americans. Rising debt reduces business investment and slows economic growth. It also increases expectations of higher rates of inflation and erosion of confidence in the US dollar. Who does the United States owe the most debt to? As of July 2020, Japan overtook China and became the largest foreign debt collector for the US. The United States currently owes Japan about $1.2 trillion, according to the US Treasury report. The American people pay $8 million an hour in taxed interest to the Federal Reserve Bank. Treasury bonds are government securities that have a 20-year or 30-year term, and they pay a fixed interest rate on a semi-annual basis. They earn interest until maturity, and the owner is also paid a par amount, or the principal, when the Treasury bond matures. Why is no one buying US bonds? Elementary economic forces, too much supply and not enough demand, have collided to create the worst stretch for US government bonds since the Civil War. The government keeps borrowing to cover its budget deficits, while once reliable buyers of that debt, both at home and abroad, have pulled back. Interest rate risks. As are all bonds, Treasury bonds are subject to price volatility as a result of changes in market interest rates. Inflation risk. The interest earned on Treasury securities may not keep pace with inflation, with the exception of Treasury inflation-protected securities, or TIPS. There are two ways to make money on bonds: through interest payments and selling a bond for more than you paid. With most bonds, you'll get regular interest payments while you hold the bond. Most bonds have a fixed interest rate. Keep in mind, Donald Trump is the liquidator. A liquidator is a person appointed to wind up the affairs of a company or firm. In law, a liquidator is the officer appointed when a company goes into winding up or liquidation, who has responsibility for collecting in all of the assets under such circumstances of the company and settling all claims against the company before putting the company into dissolution. In law, dissolution is any of several legal events that terminate a legal entity or agreement, such as a marriage, adoption, corporation, or union. Dissolution is the last stage of liquidation, the process by which a company is brought to an end and the assets and property of the company are gone forever. A legal entity refers to any business, organization, or individual that's required to meet legal obligations as set by local, state, and federal laws. Think of it as a separate person in the eyes of the law. The job of the liquidator is to verify claims of all the creditors and consolidate them, to take into his custody or control all the assets, property, effects, and actionable claims of the corporate debtor, to evaluate the assets and property of the corporate debtor in the manner and prepare a report. The financial position of the United States includes assets of at least $269 trillion, 1,576% of GDP, and debts of $145.8 trillion, 852% of GDP, to produce a net worth of at least $123.8 trillion, 723% of GDP. Keep in mind, just like young Elder said back to the Reagan era, TRUMPONOMICS or KAMALANOMICS, you pick. They're about to run a strange program here, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, talking about combinating and consolidating. You had to rob to get rich in the Reagan era. The Reagan era, or Age of Reagan, is an era in American history that lasted from 1981 to 1989. It is used by historians and political theorists to show that the conservative Reagan Revolution, led by President Ronald Reagan in domestic and foreign policy, had a long and lasting impact. Reagan signed the Tax Reform Act of 1986, simplifying the tax code by reducing rates and removing several tax breaks, and the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, which enacted sweeping changes to U.S. immigration law and granted amnesty to 3 million illegal immigrants. What was Reaganomics? Reaganomics was the cutting of federal income taxes, cutting the U.S. government spending budget, cutting programs, scaling down the government workforce, maintaining low interest rates, and keeping a watchful inflation hedge on the monetary supply was Ronald Reagan's formula for a successful economic turnaround. In the US, Republican tax plans and policies are often labeled trickle-down economics, including the Reagan tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. Donald Trump's new Platinum Plan is just a nice way of saying Trumponomics. Trumponomics is just a modern-day, updated version of Reaganomics. Mark my word, if these plans are enacted, even without congressional approval, 4.3 million people could lose overtime protections, 40 million people could have their food assistance reduced, 220,000 American jobs could be lost, and much, much more. The stakes are higher than ever for democracy and for people. These threats aren't hypothetical, these are their real plans. The Heritage Foundation and the 100-plus organizations that make up the Project 2025 Advisory Board have mapped out exactly how they will achieve their extreme ends. They aim to carry out many of the most troubling proposals through an anti-democratic president and political loyalists installed in the executive branch without waiting for congressional action. And while many of these plans are unlawful, winning in court is not guaranteed, given that the same far-right movement that is behind Project 2025 has shaped our current court system. To combat the threats posed by Project 2025, we have to first understand them. What follows are some of the most dangerous proposals that make up Project 2025, specifically those that could be implemented through federal agencies and a far-right executive branch. The majority of Americans share the same values and priorities, but Project 2025 wants to push an extreme out-of-touch agenda on all of us. By reading this guide and sharing it, we can begin to address these threats and go on offense towards building a bold, inclusive democracy for all people. The Economic Development Administration, EDA, was responsible for investing billions of ARP dollars into transformative infrastructure projects across the nation. According to their 2022 report, these investments resulted in 220,000 jobs and generated nearly $20 billion in private investment. Project 2025 proposes that EDA grants should be consolidated with other programs and/or eliminated, which would undermine the ability of the federal government to invest in communities across the nation, with effects that could devastate working people, small businesses, and the overall health of our economy. Economic support programs at risk. One of the most alarming aspects of Project 2025 is its potential to drastically undermine economic support programs that families depend on. The child tax credit, which has been crucial in reducing child poverty, faces severe cuts or elimination under the reallocation of resources. Without the support of the child tax credit, millions of families could plunge deeper into financial insecurity, struggling to afford basic necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. Threats to education and childcare. The foundation of early childhood education and childcare support is also under siege with Project 2025. Federal funding cuts to programs such as Head Start and childcare subsidies could severely limit access to quality early education. This would disproportionately affect children from low-income families, widening the educational achievement gap and hindering long-term socio-economic mobility for the next generation. Higher taxes for middle-class families project. 2025's playbook also includes plans to increase taxes for middle-class families and allow employers to stop paying overtime. Chapter 25 of the project, 2025 Policy Playbook says, the Treasury should work with Congress to simplify the tax code by enacting a simple two-rate individual tax system of 15% and 30% that eliminates most deductions, credits, and exclusions. The 30% tax rate would start at or near the Social Security wage base, which is currently $168,600. Currently, there are 7 different income tax rates, which are tied to inflation-adjusted federal income tax brackets. The two-rate tax system, along with the elimination of deductions and credits Project 2025 plans to implement, wouldn't take into account an individual family's financial situation and would increase the tax burden on middle-class families. 91% of people disagree with this proposed tax policy. Threats to religious freedom. Faith is at the center of life for millions of Americans, binding together families and communities and shaping the values we live by. One of the greatest strengths of America's democracy is its protection of our God-given rights to religious liberty and freedom of conscience. No one, not even the government, can dictate how we worship God or what we must believe. Project 2025 threatens to undermine this fundamental freedom by having the government define religious values for the purpose of shaping policies around things like Sabbath observance, public education, child welfare, and marriage. When the government gets into the practice of selecting winners and losers between people's religious beliefs, it is faithful Americans who lose. Regulations on Contraception and Life-Saving Reproductive Care Project. 2025 outlines plans to remove some forms of emergency contraception from no-cost coverage. Currently, the Affordable Care Act mandates that most private health insurance plans cover preventive services, including all FDA-approved birth control methods and counseling, without co-payments, co-insurance, or deductibles. Rescinding this coverage could have significant consequences for American families nationwide. Data compiled by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, is intentionally independent from partisan interest and is frequently relied on by the public, employers, researchers, and government organizations. According to BLS, they measure employment, compensation, worker safety, productivity, and price movements. This information is used by job seekers, workers, business leaders, and others to help them make sound decisions at work and at home. Project 2025, however, wants to consolidate the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis and Census Bureau with BLS into one agency. While formal reorganization requires explicit delegation from Congress to go through, the Trump administration made an attempt in 2018 to bypass Congress and use other executive powers to do so. If an extremist were to occupy the executive branch again, Project 2025 would want them to go even further. A new analysis estimates that if Project 2025 were enacted, nearly 48 million women of reproductive age would lose their guaranteed no-cost access to emergency contraception. Emergency contraception is safe and effective at preventing pregnancy before it occurs, yet Project 2025 aims to remove this critical option, severely undermining couples' ability to prayerfully grow their families. Additionally, the plan proposes withdrawing mifepristone, an often life-saving medication used from the market by using the Comstock Act, a law that would stop the drug from being sent through the mail. It would also force the FDA to reconsider its approval of mifepristone, both of which are used in life-saving miscarriage care. Threat to overtime pay. Project 2025's proposal would enable employers to stop paying their workers overtime. This would remove overtime protections for 4.3 million workers. Parents often have to work overtime to adequately support their families. But if Project 2025's policy is implemented, parents wouldn't be compensated for the fact that they are working extra hours for their family. 92% of people oppose policy that would allow employers to stop paying overtime. Erosion of healthcare access. Healthcare policies, particularly those like Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, which serve low-income families, are at grave risk. Project 2025's budget reallocations could result in reduced coverage or increased costs for these essential programs. The fallout would likely be catastrophic, with families facing higher rates of untreated illnesses, exacerbating health disparities and leading to a surge in preventable diseases and conditions. Prescription drug prices. The Inflation Reduction Act, signed into law by President Biden in 2022, capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. 8.4 million Americans with diabetes need insulin to survive. Politicizing BLS and reducing the data collection capacity of the agency by consolidating it into the Census Bureau would make it harder to know how our economy is doing, whether families' paychecks are growing, and what steps we may need to take to make sure small businesses are thriving and people have enough in their bank accounts to make ends meet. Project 2025 would stop efforts to lower prescription drugs by favoring big corporations and the wealthy at the expense of ordinary people and families. The plan proposes to cut corporate taxes by an additional $500 billion and safeguards large corporations that engage in price gouging on essentials like groceries, gas, and prescription drugs, and grants them greater control to create their own regulations. This is likely to place the high insulin price burden back on people with diabetes and their families. Increased housing insecurity. Housing assistance programs, including Section 8 vouchers and public housing support, provide a safety net for families struggling to secure stable housing. Project 2025 threatens to dismantle this safety net by redirecting funds away from these critical programs. The inevitable result would be increased housing insecurity and homelessness, pushing vulnerable families into dire living conditions and creating a ripple effect that impacts communities nationwide. The authors of Project 2025 think that young people should be able to work in inherently dangerous jobs, in roles that are currently not permitted due to significant safety concerns that have long been established and enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor, DOL. Project 2025 would change DOL policies and allow America's youth to work these jobs, meaning young people entering the labor force out of economic necessity could be subjected to more dangerous work because they need the income more than others and cannot access a safer job or get paid as well. According to research from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, 86% of all Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program (SNAP) benefits go to households that include a child, elderly person, or person with disabilities, and 92% of all SNAP benefits go to households with income at or below the federal poverty line. The Thrifty Food Plan plays an important role in ensuring recipients of food assistance are able to access food that composes a balanced and nutritious diet. In tandem, the Biden administration has increased food assistance outlays to account for increased costs associated with more nutritious foods. Project 2025 wants to reverse course and reimpose ineffective work requirements, which recent studies have shown do not actually increase employment but do still drive down the number of people who use food assistance. Onto SNAP and reevaluate the Thrifty Food Plan. Head Start is a critical program that helps over 1 million children across the nation become ready for school by providing them with mental, emotional, and social support programming. This program provides targeted assistance to low-income children as an important method to bridge inequities and ensure that all children receive a solid foundation as they embark on their educational journey. Project 2025 proposes to eliminate the program. Without Head Start, families who are already struggling financially could experience even greater economic burdens as they would have to spend more on childcare and education. Disability benefits are often critical lifelines for veterans who became disabled as a result of their military service, and can be the difference between a veteran being able to put food on the table or not. Project 2025 proposes to have the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs cut costs by having fewer health conditions qualify veterans for disability benefits. A proposal could greatly restrict disabled veterans' access to life-sustaining benefits. If appropriations legislation or a stopgap spending bill is not passed by Congress by September 30th, 2024, the federal government will enter a partial shutdown on October 1st. A shutdown would mean that fee-based immigration processing, including USCIS benefit and State Department visa and citizenship document processing, will continue. However, the USCIS E-Verify EB4 non-minister religious worker program and Conrad 30 program would expire if Congress fails to extend them. Department of Labor immigration functions such as LCA, prevailing wage and perm processing would be suspended in a shutdown until Congress passes a stopgap spending measure or a FY 2025 budget. A reckless and unnecessary shutdown will have serious impacts across the nation, hurting working families, endangering our national security and jeopardizing our economy. A shutdown is not inevitable, but employers and foreign nationals should be prepared for the possibility. As FY 2025 federal budget discussions continue, US government funding could expire after midnight on September 30th, 2024, if Congress fails to pass legislation to avoid a government shutdown. In the event of a shutdown, some immigration processes would be suspended, while several others should be unaffected, though processing delays could occur if the shutdown is lengthy. A shutdown is by no means certain. Congress is actively negotiating stopgap measures to provide short-term funding to keep the government open while the FY 2025 budget is debated. It has become a common congressional practice in recent years to enact one or more successive stopgap measures to keep the government open while full budget negotiations continue. The most recent government shutdown occurred in late December 2018 and lasted for 35 days. Services such as restrooms, visitors centers, campgrounds, information kiosks, trash removal, and interpretative programs are all closed during the shutdown. The vast majority of National Park Service employees are furloughed.